The new Stygian for version 6.1, aka Luna 2, has came out like over a week ago, and I know I'm a bit late to the party due to some RL stuff, so let's not waste any time and jump straight to the first boss. So the first boss, we do have the Frostnight Herra, and the way the mechanic works is like this. Upon starting the fight, it will enter a buff state and gain 120% resistance, totaling up to 130%, and there will be a special bar right below its HP. Filling the bar with 50 instances of damage will remove the buff state completely, thus reducing the overall resistance. However, if you deal a singular Luna reaction instance of damage, this is counted as 6 instead of 1, thus reducing the total amount of hits you'll have to do in order to remove the buff state overall. Afterwards, it will gain a permanent infusion and immunity to the element that did the most damage to it during the buff state, not to be confused with the removal condition, which is a hit-based thing. This one focuses more on the element that did the most damage, like the biggest number during that state itself. However, this does not occur if the element is a Luna reaction or physical. And then after it actually gets back up, based on the 2-minute timer, it will re-enter the buff state roughly about after 1 minute. However, depending on your RNG, it could do a few extra attacks, which could extend this whole thing to about, let's say, about 45 seconds left. So for team recommendations, I'm going to start off with a few of the ones that I tried, but I think between Lunar-Bloom and Lunar-Charged, I would say Lunar-Charged is going to be the easy one, notably with Flins as the main core. So this is the new infographic that I will be putting for the future guides. However, I didn't really have time for the other two bosses, or at least I didn't have time to do the visual of this style for the other two bosses, so this is the only one I can really offer. Obviously, Lunar-Charged Flins with his own DPS set. You build him for the crit stat with a bit of ER. Inefar would be perfect to pair it together with Flins. However, because Inefar does apply a decent amount of Lunar-Charge, it's possible for you to basically just run a Flins-less team with some other DPS that can take advantage of Inefar's ability. I'm not going to explain all the artifact sets around here. I'll just maybe point out a few of the not so obvious stuff. Sucrose is going to be amazing here in his team because she actually does buff EM. If you want to run between, let's say, we'll talk about the weapon status, or I'll talk about the artifacts from now. Now, I know you do actually have two options. For my particular case, I ran my Inefa with the SMS support set. So that means in order to maximize my buff, my Aino is currently running on the instructor set with the Favonius Greatsword. However, for my personal recommendation, I think it would be ideal for you to go full ER rolls, which on an instructor set, which is a 4-star artifact, that's not going to be the easiest thing to do. However, Favonius Greatsword will carry you to that extent. Try to build a bit of crit, and my recommendation is between 230 to about 250 ER. 250 would be the most comfortable for Stygian because if you trigger the Fav proc, use the singular skill, you should be able to max out her burst almost instantly. And then we have Xingqiu. Xingqiu, you can either go for Emblem or Noblesse, depending on which other flavor of, which flavor that you want to use. If you want a bit more damage, but I think in this situation, if you're running a Flint's team, it doesn't really matter too much. You can go for Noblesse for a bit of damage buff. You can go for Emblem for a bit of damage. Generic builds, and the same could be said for Sarah, because I think between Fischl and Sarah, if you do have a Constellation 6 Sarah, you would be able to provide Flint's enough buff to make it almost possible that he can actually clear it without relying on Nefer. Now, as for the weapons, I didn't really include the signature for obvious reasons. Inefar options are mine. I think mine is currently running about, is it the Missive Windspear, because deathmatch is on someone else. I used to run Flints on the Prospector Shovel, but I recently swapped in the Staff of Homa, but performance-wise, it's about the same because I only got like a 3-second faster clear with the Staff of Homa. Now, Sucrose, you can really use the generic Sack Frag for just maximum EM. Or if you optimize your rotation a bit and make her second last before swapping into Flints, you can use the Trailing Tales of Dragon Slayer to transfer a massive attack buff every other rotation. And I know there is Fav Greatsword. I think between the Fav Greatsword or the Flame Forge Insight, while I am aware that the Flame Forge Insight does give you a flight energy refund, for my personal experience, I think using Fav is much better because if you build full ER, the Fav passive gains more value, which allows you to almost gain enough energy to burst every single rotation, and preferably the first rotation is the one that matters the most. Now, Xingqiu, you can technically use him in Favonius, but in certain situations where you do want to care about him getting his burst basically instantly in the first elemental skill, then Sack Sword here would be great. And then Sarah, just generic Fav because Favonius is king and I'm basically the high priest of the Church of Favonius. Now, between the two, the reason why I put Lunar-Bloom second, at least for the fair with the recent release, is that I find her to be a bit more underwhelming compared to the likes of Flins, at least in terms of some of the viewer clears that I've done. And all the builds are very generic. I'm not going to explain too much. Because if you are running Nahida, which I actually forgot to include Nahida right around here, if you are running Nahida, you could consider running, let's say, Deepwood on Nahida, or maybe like SMS on Nahida and then Deepwood on Llama. It's really a matter of mix and matching. I personally would prefer SMS on Llama because Llama's burst does actually buff the instances of Lunar-Bloom. So if you don't have enough energy to use the burst, there are times where I find that I have a bit of energy problem when the character is not built to have enough ER. Nahida burst is a bit on the optional side due to how long the animation is, but what matters is you have a pair of one Deepwood Memories and then one SMS in the Nefer team. If you don't have, say, the likes of Diona, which I also forgot to put here, Sucrose with, it doesn't actually, this one is not exactly 4 VV, I think this one should actually be Instructors, so you can run a 4 Instructors Sucrose with full-on sack frag, just maximize the EM to give the maximum EM buff. It should be able to buff Nefer's damage by quite a decent amount. And the same can be said for around this section. You can run Aino, whether it's Instructors or SMS, it depends on whether you already have an SMS user on your team. ER recommendation is about the same. Now, Xingqiu here, between Xingqiu and Aino, I would actually recommend Xingqiu unless you have Constellation to Aino. Because the problem that I find is that Aino without C2 just doesn't apply enough Hydro in order to really overcome Llama and Nefer's Dendro application to generate the seeds required for Nefer's special charge attack. So if you want to run Xingqiu, I think between the two you can just run like whatever set you want. I don't think the set itself matters. You can even run a full SMS Xingqiu and you can run like Deepwood and Instructors on your other unit. Although if you can run Instructors on Xingqiu, that will be better because he will always be triggering Bloom as the solo Hydro unit. And if you happen to want a sustain unit, Cookie, you can just run anything you want. I actually recommend building full attack instead of building full EM or whatnot because you're not going to be triggering any sort of Hype Bloom. And the non-Not Cry Resonance buff, I think Electro units, for every certain points of attack, you'll give a bonus for all Luna reactions. So if you try to build Cookie with triple attack and maybe Faf as a weapon or whatever weapon you want, then you can try to maximize the non-Not Cry Resonance bonus for Nefer's Lunar-Bloom damage. As for the weapons, most of these are the very straightforward ones. So between Black Marrow and Dawning Frost, the craftable is R5, I think it's as standard. R1 Dawning Frost is not too far behind from Black Marrow, though the moment you do have at least Refinement 2 or Refinement 3 of the new weapon, it would be better than the craftable. The Witsif is of course strong, but you can only use like 2/3 of it, so it's really just a matter of RNG. All the weapons for the other units are also very straightforward. Actually, this one I should probably remove Trading Tails. I'm just going to make a magical block just covers around here. So for the very weird, funny physical part where you can play around the mechanic and try to just break the shield, removing the absorption and using this physical, Crescent Pike makes a return once again. The way it works is because Crescent Pike's passive makes it so that every instance of damage, there's a chance to gain additional instances of damage based on whatever, like I think attack stat that you have. This actually counts towards the Frostnight Herra's mechanic, which actually makes it really easy for you to break this really fast. Now for the users that you want to pair it up with, you only have 3 options between Zhongli, Shengling, and Rosaria. I would say out of all 3, Zhongli has a very fast multi-hit combo, so you're able to break the thing really fast. Depending on what units you use, you can probably use like Tenacity or Petra, but for the most part, you just build him full HP. And for the most optimal combo, you do, I think, is it N4 or N5D? I think Posedit may be correct. But basically, when he does the attack where he kicks his spear and it starts spinning, you can use a dash cancel to save you a bit of time and reset the whole combo and repeat until the shield is broken. He should be able to break the shield in like 6-7 seconds or even before he jumps up in the air and does the binary explosion thing. So Zhongli is a pretty good user for Pike here. Shengling is also a very similar idea. In certain teams, which I will talk about later, her combo is going to be the part where she starts doing the multi-hit, I think 4-hit stabbing attack. Then afterwards, you just simply cancel with a dash and then just repeat until you can break the shield. Shengling here is particularly on the better side because she's a pyro unit, and if you run certain teams where you want to run, let's say, like a Neuvillette Vape. So Shengling, if you build her with the standard ER crit, but just give her more ER and then just snap on Pike on her, you should be able to gain the Pyro Infusion. That strategy I'll talk a bit more in depth when we talk about team recommendations. And the same can be said for Rosaria. Same idea, similar build. You run Noblesse if you want to use the burst often, but for the most part, it doesn't matter for any of the melt teams. Just make sure you do the part where she does the funny lots, like the attack where she does a lot of multi-hits. Just cancel that part. Snap on Pike if you want to make life easier. And for the last option, which is actually a pretty decent option, is actually Lanyan. Lanyan, I'll talk about here. I think I didn't mention the weapon around here. But basically, Lanyan, you want to run Instructors instead of Viridescent because you're likely to run Lanyan in, say, a Mavuika Melt team where you swirl off of Sitlali's off-field cryo application. And on top of that, because Viridescent cannot trigger against Pyro, so running Instructors will be better here because it allows you to give the EM buff to Mavuika to maximize her melt damage. For stat-wise, you don't really have to care too much about it because all that really matters is that you're running Sacrificial Fragments because this will allow you to use a skill twice. If you have Consolation 1, this would be a very good strategy because C1 does give additional hits to build up towards the shield, which makes it almost possible for you to break the shield in like 2 skills. Now for the Mavuika Melt team, it's kind of an interesting part because I can't exactly recommend Mavuika unless you master this particular combo. I'll briefly explain a little bit later, but I'm just going to go over the build for now. Mavuika is a generic build. You can run an attack sense if your Mavuika is cracked enough. However, for maximum damage, I do recommend running full EM because EM sense is actually going to give a much bigger overall damage ceiling compared to an attack sense on this particular melt team. Sitlali doesn't really care about scrolls because you're going to be having the Herra absorb the permanent cryo anyways, so running full tenacity should give a little bit of a small damage boost for Mavuika's personal damage. And then the same can be said for Shilonen. You can run her on Instructors if you do have that, but if you have only scrolls, it doesn't really matter. Just make sure you max out the elemental skill, and if you're running Favonius, you try to go for a bit of crit rate and make sure your elemental skills develop enough to maximize the rest shred. Ayaka actually brings a usage return once again, however, her artifact sets doesn't really matter, and you'll have to run something like the Sacrificial Sword. I'll explain that later. And for ER, I recommend just running ER Sands and try to build up with 230, preferably 250 ER is the most comfortable because the moment Sac Sword triggers, you can get 2 skills and immediately gain her burst really fast. Her most optimal combo is simply just spamming the N1 charge attacks and just make sure you dodge the hits so that you don't actually die. This should build up the Herra shield in like about 10 seconds or so and you give it the permanent cryo infusion. I already mentioned about Lanyan, so I'm not going to talk too much. Rosaria, same for the shield breaker strat, use Noblesse with Peasant Pike, build her enough ER to make sure that she actually triggers burst and do the dash cancel combo. As for the weapons, all of this is pretty generic. Now, as a non-1000 Blazing Suns owner, my Mavuika is really having options between these 3 other weapons between Gravestone, Mailed Flower, and Serpent Spine. So if you are running Gravestone, then you can just do however you like as long as you play around this new Mav combo. However, if you are running Mailed Flower, just make sure you use her elemental skill before the burst because I was practicing the new combo just now and I managed to get the clear for about 2 to 3 seconds to spare. And the reason why I failed before is because I didn't trigger the Mailed Flower passive right before I used the burst. Serpent Spine's gonna be good though, you will have to try to balance around the Codex crit over cap crit thing, so just use whichever weapon to your disposal, although the combo is more important than your weapon, so I'll talk about that later. Sitlali, Trilling Tales or Wandering Even Star, you can try to transfer this to Mavuika, that'd be great. Peak Patrol Song is nice for Shilonen, but not really mandatory. It will give you a nice damage buff overall if you don't care about energy, though Favonius is something I recommend between the 2. Ayaka, Sac Sword, 250 ER with ER Sans, just make sure she gets the cryo infusion for the Herra. I already mentioned about Sitlali, and then Rosaria, there's Favonius and Pike. Anyways, this is a short section for me explaining 2 other Mavuika combos. I'll make a separate full in-depth video on how it works, why it works, and how this is much better than your regular whatever spin donut combo that you have right now. Regular combo in the melt team is usually like 1, 2, and then you let go like that, and then you 1, 2 charge attacks and you let go. And that's the old most optimal melt team. And then now we have this new combo, which if I let go here, yeah, and you might think how this works. I'm not going to explain why it works, that's for the video, but I want you, first thing to start off, get used to the final hit combo. So the way it works is that whenever you hold Mavuika's charge attack, right, like if you see my input right now, I can let go, but there's like a minimum animation time for how Mavuika's charge attack works. The way this works is that it does some weird thing with pre-buffering Mavuika's charge attack and takes advantage of the animation cancel. So first, I want you to practice holding the final hit. Just hold, let go. Get used to the shortly holding to initiate the animation and just simply let go. And then the way it works is that when you do hold like this, let's just hold it for now. When you let go, you want to hold the charge attack. So I'm going to show a quick demonstration. So the idea is that when she's about to do the final attack, you want to let go and just hold the normal attack again in order to pre-buffer or pre-cue the charge attack. So what you want to do is like this. Okay, I kind of messed up that one. So I'll explain it in post for this one. Hello, Post Ethereal here, and to explain the final step, what you want to do is after you practice the previous step, which is holding the attack the button after or in the middle of Mavuika's final hit animation, immediately after you see the final hit land, like the damage number comes up, you do a dash. I think it's you do a dash and then you let go of the attack button and quickly press it again. I'll play it in slow-mo right now. So what you want to do is you do the step 1, you hold the final attack. The moment the charge attack animation goes in, you let go to initiate the final hit. And as she's about to jump up, she jumps up in the air and she's about to slam down to do the final hit. You want to hold the attack button again and then you wait. Then once you see the damage number come out from the final hit, you quickly use your right click or whichever dash input that you have. And then after she dashes, you quickly let go of the left click. I think you quickly let go of the attack button and then you hold it again. This allows you to do the thing that's happening on the screen right now. So I'll explain more of it in detail, but I think this is as far as I can go before I actually make a full dedicated video for this. And then for the second combo, which is the most optimal combo, which allows you to, I think, get 6 to 7 melts, it's basically this. Notice how I'm not holding any sort of normal attack or input in order to do this charge attack. Well, the same idea works for the previous combo. Basically, if you let go of Mavuika's charge attack after you initiate it, and then you press you hold or you press the normal attack twice, this basically pre-buffers or holds on to the charge attack, which basically prevents you from, or rather this allows you to do the whole charge attack without actually holding. So similar to the previous idea, now the combo is going to be like this. It's a bit difficult for me to do, so let me try to get used to it. But it's something along the likes of like that. Before I forget, if you want to practice, I recommend just teleporting to the Statue of 7 to the left side of the Flower of Feather clan, as well as to the north of the Masters of Nightwind. This has this very nice little ledge right here, which allows you to practice both combos regardless of whether it's this one or the new C3D combo. So yeah, that's a brief explanation of the combo. I'll do a post edit to just explain how the combo works a bit in the detailed side. So I'll try to slow-mo the footage for you to be able to understand. This is going to be the very basic one. I'll go more in-depth into a separate video later. And for the last thing I can talk about is really just the Skirk freeze team. You can run the generic like Purina Skirk Premium with Escoffier. The last unit, you can actually swap between a few. I think so far from all the clears that I've seen, you can either use Alexo Sitlali for the Scrolls buff and potentially Trilling Tales, or you can use something like Mona or Charlotte on a full ER build to make sure that you give the maximum damage bonus. Weapon option wise is really just the same generic stuff, although I have seen someone clearing, I believe, Dyer or the Herra, or was it the Operative or something? Basically, they run like the Skirk Premium team, but they run Sitlali as the third unit, and they were using the Calamity of Issue. So keep in mind, between a few F2P weapons, aside from the new 4-star burst weapon, Finale of the Deep is what you call the standard weapon that you can use around with. However, if you are running Sitlali or any sort of shield in your team, Calamity of Issue is almost comparable to a 5-star with the amount of stats that it provides to Skirk. Two more teams I would like to make another recommendation, but will be a bit situational, would be between Mualani BurnVape as well as Neuvillette Vaporise. So for the Mualani BurnVape team, the one thing that I didn't mention in the shield breaking part is that burning ticks very fast. Every 2 seconds, burning ticks 8 times, which totals up to about 4 ticks per second. So if you pair Shangling together with another Dendro unit, let's say for this case, Mualani BurnVape has Shilunan and Nahida, then you can actually get the Herra to absorb Pyro, which gives you free Vaporize for Mualani without having to rely on Shangling itself. Although a few notes I would have to say is that my own Mualani at C0R1 did almost get there, but it had like about 10% more HP left. So I think with a bit of investment, or if you have a super crack or a C1 Mualani, then maybe you'll have a bit of an easier time. And my Shangling is still just running Favonius with a super high ER 4 emblem build. Nahida is running the full-on EM. I think no artifacts here can really be too helpful aside from, let's say, Instructor, but I prefer running Instructor on Shilunan because at the very least, triggering Crystallize will guarantee the Instructor buff, which allows Mualani to do just a little bit more damage to give you a chance to get the clear. I have tried the other variant, which is replacing Nahida with Emily, although the best way to get around this is to spend the first half of the time just on Shangling doing the N4D combo, trying to get her burst up as much as possible, and then once you're about halfway or 75% of the way to removing the Herra's bar, then you can summon Emily's little lantern so that her Dendro damage does not overtake Shengling's pyro damage. And the second team would be the Neuvillette Vaporise team. I have seen, I think Casual Abyss did a clear using the Farina team. Granted, I think my Neuvillette was also super duper close. I think it just needed a few more seconds. Everything is roughly similar, but the difference is that my Neuvillette is running an R5 Sacrificial Jade. And I feel like there's a little bit of an RNG if you do want to use with Civ. So if your RNG or if you get the buff that isn't the EM buff or at least the damage bonus buff, then your run can basically be just screwed up completely. So if you do have C0 R1 Neuvillette, I think you have a better chance at getting things done. As usual, I put my Shilonen on Instructors instead of Scroll just to give a bit of EM to both Furina and Neuvillette to make sure that both, whenever they vaporize, they do as much damage as possible. And then Shangling is on the typical AR build. And the last tip that I would give before we move on to the next boss is that if you're running any sort of range units, like for example Neuvillette here, you can stay at what I call to be a medium range in between the center and then the outskirts of the area. So whenever you're at a certain distance from the Herra, it will do this one move where it summons a bunch of projectiles, and this move takes quite a long time to complete, which gives you a bit of advantage so that you can get as much DPS as possible before he goes back to the center and reinitiates the infusion phase. For the second boss, we have the Battle-Hardened Lightkeeper. If you fought this guy in Abyss, you probably know the mechanics, but otherwise, I'll try my best to explain how he works. Basically, he has two phases, the human and the wild hunt phase. In order for you to enter the second phase, you have to deplete his regular HP bar, which is the red HP bar. After the human HP bar is gone, he'll be stunned for, I'll give or take about 10 seconds or so, and dealing damage at this point will fill his death bar. Filling the death bar will reduce his max HP, and here's a little image right here. I call the red bar as the human bar and the black bar as the death bar. And because the death bar, the more the death bar is filled up, the more of the max HP you actually reduce. It's kind of similar to the Destined Death mechanic in Elden Ring, if anyone has played that game before. After he recovers, he will heal back to his max HP. And in order for you to just deal with this, depleting his HP bar again will add to a certain portion of his death bar, making it much easier for you to just not deal with the DPS check, although it's still a massive DPS check. So the strategy here, if you can, is that when his human health bar is about to end before you enter phase 2, you can intentionally end your rotation early before depleting the human HP bar, so that when you set up your rotation again and go back to, say, the likes of Skirk, you can try to maximize the damage into the second phase by filling the death bar as much as possible before he recovers. From my experience, I think I was able to fill about, give or take, 30 to 40%, maybe not 40%, but I would say about 25 to 30% of his death bar before he recovers, so this is a strategy that I do recommend. Now, upon entering the second phase, he will recover to max HP and he will summon Wild Hunt Exiles. Do note that he only summons 4 Exiles for Menacing difficulty and below, however for Fearless and above, he only will summon 2 Exiles. And after fighting for a while and doing a few moves, he will start glowing and holding up his lantern in the air to try to kill all the exiles on the field. If he kills all the exiles, he will heal a portion of his max HP, thus reducing his death bar, and this is not something you really want to do. So for you to stop this, you can either kill all the exiles before he completes the move, or you deplete his human HP bar in order to stun him again. If you do have 1 or 2 Nordcry units, his death bar in the second phase will be filled and based on an extra 65% or 90% of the damage dealt by your characters. However, this is only applicable to phase 2 compared to the regular Wild Hunt enemies. The best strategy that I found by far is that when you start the fight or throughout the fight, you want to try to bait him and the exiles towards the corner. So let's say because he has a few attacks where he does a bit of teleportation, and most of his attacks are kind of like melee and a bit of range. If you can somehow bait him and try to drag the fight nearer towards the corner, whenever he does enter phase 2, what you want to do is go on the opposing side and make sure that when he summons a Wild Hunt Exile, you are facing him towards his corner, because he tends to teleport right after summoning the exile backwards. So if you can try to face him towards the wall, he will teleport back into the wall alongside with his little exile partners. This is mostly ideal because if you're running any sort of team with a bit of AoE, let's say Arlecchino, Veressa, Mavuika, or even any Skirk teams, this allows you to deal collateral damage with the other 2 exiles, which decreases and minimizes the chance of his healing move from succeeding. Now, as for teams, I don't think I really have to say much. I didn't really test too much teams, notably for Sigurd and as well as the Cryo Operative, so I'm going to take a bunch of people's channels for reference here. My own personal clear utilized the Oresa Mavuika Premium team. I had to go swap my artifacts around to bring my math from top 13% all the way to top 7% overloaded in order to actually stand a chance. And I was barely able to clear with 3 to 4 seconds to spare. Note that this is with the new Mavuika combo, so once again, any team that you play with Mavuika nowadays, you do need to try to maximize the combo. I'll try to explain it further into detail in a separate video once I'm done with the Imaginary Theater guide. And another team that I know I've done on my viewers is obviously the Skirk Freeze team, however that does require quite a decent amount of investment. If you don't have at least Furina and Escoffier, I don't actually recommend trying Skirk or at all because the damage is required is going to be a lot. And the obvious shield teams are like Flins Lunar-Charged or Nefer LUnar-Bloom, but we're not really going to talk about that because you can just... It's basically a boss that shields Lunar reactions, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. I've seen a few other runs where they basically run, let's say like this one from Casual Abyss right here is running some sort of Mavuika Melt team. I know there are a few other options. I think someone has cleared it. If I can find the footage, I'll put it in the background and give some credit. I remember seeing someone's Omega base Yoimiya run where they run like Yoimiya Overloaded, which is Omega base. I'm pretty sure they've cleared the Frostnight Herra even with the Yoimiya Overloaded. So at the end of the day, it's really just a matter of DPS check if you don't have any of these units. But yeah, I can't really give too much recommendations outside of that. And for the last boss, we do have the Veteran Frost Operative. The mechanic of this local legend is going to be a bit different from the overall variant because Hoyo really loves to screw us over. So at the start of the fight, she will consume her own HP in order to create a shield that's equivalent to 22.5% of her max HP. On the shield creation, she applies Bond of Life to all characters during the hunting attack, and it will stack up extra Bond of Life as long as her shield is active. And this is basically kind of just an anti-healing mechanic, so Furina is not recommended here. However, if you break the shield, this will remove an equivalent amount to the shield that she has, which is about 22.5% HP, as true damage to her. However, the downside is that, you don't actually gain any sort of benefit aside from just having a DPS check to break the shield. So yeah, she does have very high frozen resistance and about 70% cryo res, so I don't recommend running any sort of cryo teams here. Now, unfortunately, if I released my video a bit earlier or before Hoyo fixed it, fall damage tech with Sigurd and Jin was something that was viable. I'm sure you've seen this somewhere in the net before on YouTube, where people were running Jin to time it perfectly when she does his special attack in order to instantly break shield, and even using this mechanic to clear Dire with Jin alone. There's a similar mechanic where they run Geo Traveler and they use Jean's skill to try to bounce her towards it and does instantly breaking the shield, but unfortunately this no longer works because as the moment of this recording, Hoyo has patched out fall damage for this particular boss, and let's just say that Hoyo doesn't like fun despite making these kind of enemies very much of a massive DPS check. I'm not so sure about whether the Sigurd bubble still works. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I mean, if it does, that'll be cool. If it doesn't, then well, it is what it is. It was fun while it lasted. As for the teams that I run, Arlecchino is obviously going to be a very strong clear here. I have tried a run on my own, I believe, using the Mavuika Overloaded team, though that does require you to master the combo once again. Though I think the most recent clear I did was, there was a Mavuika Monopyro with, I think, Bennett, Kazuha, and Shilonen. Now, in terms of the other ones, I generally cannot think of a lot of other ones. Let me just see whatever I have. Okay, the Arlecchino team does clear. Both Arlecchino teams clear. Mavuika teams clear. I think Veresa team can clear at the end of the day. All I can say is that just don't run a team that relies on healing, because I think on one of the clears that I did yesterday, they had like a top 1% Mavuika, but they were running Tidal Shadow, and the Tidal Shadow passive only works if Mavuika actually receives healing, which doesn't actually work during the shield phase, and on top of that, you do need to run like a very strong healer like Jean or Tidal Shadow to activate. And keep in mind, Bond of Life does not count as healing because it's basically like a heal blocker. Yeah, other than that, I generally cannot talk too much about what other teams I have. I think I was kind of busy, and creating all these visuals does take a bit of time. So just do let me know if you want me to continue these visuals, or maybe spend less time on creating the team recommended visuals and trying to go for more team testing. As for the other accounts, or at least for a few content creators that I would recommend if you want to have some sort of reference, I would recommend getting the likes of, looking at the videos of the likes of Casual Abyss, or Conquer 30, and to some extent Tactical Nuke. These are 3 channels that focuses on showing clears with different characters against all the different endgame modes. So I'll leave the link down in the description below, and be sure to check them out if you do want a reference for what kind of teams you can run for your own account. But otherwise, I think that's it for the Stygian guide. I think this video took a bit too long. I was kind of busy last week, so once I'm done with this and once this one comes out, hopefully by tonight if I can, I'm going to start working on the Imagine Theater guide, and then maybe I'll make a full in-depth guide for not one, but both of Mavuika's new, super strong, carpal tunnel inducing, crazy ass combo. Anyways, that's it for now. I wish you guys the best of luck in your Stygian clears, and if you want to go check out my stream, I stream every Friday and Saturday, 8:30 p.m. in GMT +8 or Singapore time. Post-edit me will just add like the Eastern Standard Time right on the screen right now. So you do want me to help you to do your fearless clears, or at least the Imagine Theater clears, do check out the stream when you have time, or just be sure to activate your notifications so that you get the notification whenever I do go live. That's it for now. See you guys next time. Peace out.